Good Phil.
Well, yes. Good morning to you all at Freeschool Court, Bridgend. It's so good to be with you this morning. To wish you a happy new year. More than a happy new year, a year that is blessed of the Lord. A happy new year for 2021. It's a bit strange, of course, to be worshipping with you, first of all, like this on Zoom. But we've all learned to really value these modern technology devices, haven't we? Who would have thought this time last year that we would all become so familiar with Zoom meetings? Most of us, well, I'd never even heard of Zoom this time last year, and now we're all operating Zoom on our devices with ease and enjoying this facility. Well, before we look at God's word this morning, as Ewan mentioned, he's just asked me to say something briefly about myself and our family by way of introduction. I don't feel very comfortable about doing that sort of thing, but as I thought about it this week, I thought, well, at least it's an opportunity for us all, really, as we think about our lives, to look back and give gratitude to God, thanks to God for his goodness and for his grace in our lives through the good times and through the trials and through the difficulties. Well, very briefly, just as Ewan mentioned, we've been serving the Lord in Greece, in Athens, for the last 5 years. And in November last year, November 2020, my wife, Kathy, and I, we returned to the UK. I've been pastoring an international church called St. Andrew's International Church there in Athens. We went there in 2015 when our youngest child, we have 5 children, our youngest, Beth, was 18 and off to university. And so we thought that was a window of opportunity for us to get back, in a way, into international missions. In Athens, in St. Andrew's Church, I was pastoring 2 congregations belonging to the same church. One up in a northern suburb called Kefissia, which was quite well-to-do and wealthy, and the other downtown in the church building, which we shared with the Lutheran church, the German church, and they were less affluent. There were probably about 25, 30 different nations represented between those 2 congregations. And you can imagine, therefore, all the richness and yet all the challenges that sort of diversity brings. But it was a great time, and a time that we really treasure now as we look back. As well as the church work, and my wife Kathy was involved in a refugee center called Helping Hands. That was also in downtown Athens. When we arrived in 2015, I don't know if you remember, but that coincided with a fresh wave of refugees arriving in Greece at that time, from the Middle East, from Iran, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, from Syria, and so on. There's always been refugees coming to Greece for the last 20, 30 years, but there's been these waves of influx. And that wave in 2015 opened the door again for opportunity for mission to Muslims from all those countries and others. And there's been amazing testimonies through places like Helping Hands and other Christian mission agencies in the last 5 years or so. Wonderful testimonies of men and women turning in disillusionment from Islam to find reality and forgiveness and peace and hope in Jesus Christ through many different ways, through visions, through dreams, through seeking out somebody. Usually then that led to asking about who they'd seen in the vision, and then meeting with a Christian, bringing them to the Word of God and to a clarity of faith and understanding in Jesus. It's not been easy, and a lot of them, even in the refugee camps now in Greece, they suffer persecution from their fellow countrymen from their different countries. But it's been an amazing opportunity to witness God's grace and power at work. It's been a very positive last 5 years for us. Just before that, many of you know, I was a pastor, one of the pastors at Highfields Church in Cardiff for 12 years. And then before that, we were in Namibia in Southwest Africa, working there for over 12 years with AIM International. 3 of our children were born while we were in Namibia, but all 5 now grown up. The youngest is 23. 3 of them are married, and we're expecting our first grandchild, God willing, in March this year. So that's just a little bit about myself and the family. And as I was thinking about this week, actually, I suppose personally, I have more connection in a sense with Bridgend and so on, because, well, not only through individuals that I know there in your congregation, we go back, some of us go back many years, but also my father, Phil Jenkins, was one of the Jenkins from the pottery in Iweni. And so his home was Iweni and Bridgend. He apparently was a very accomplished potter. He left the pottery and then trained for the ministry with the Presbyterian Church of Wales. And he went with my mother to India as a missionary. In fact, I was born in India. Anyway, enough of me and our family. Thank God this morning, as we've already been thinking in our prayers and in the songs, thank God for the family of God, the international family of God, for the fellowship of God's people across the world, the people of the risen King, who, though so different from us in many ways, are united with us in our faith in Jesus Christ. So it's to that kingdom, that eternal kingdom, and it's to Jesus Christ the King to whom we turn. We look this morning, as you can see from the PowerPoint there, looking unto Jesus. I just want to talk a little bit about how to begin this new year, looking unto Jesus as God's people. I chose this text this morning because the writer encourages these first Hebrew Christians, the ones who'd come to believe Jesus as Messiah and King, to fix their eyes on Jesus, as the NIV puts it. Fix your eyes on Jesus. The picture, of course, here in these opening verses is of the Christian life as a race, very familiar picture. But it's not a 100-yard dash. The Christian life is more like a marathon. I don't know if you're involved in or taken part in long distance running. I never have. I never liked long distance running. I quite liked 100 yards, maybe even 200s, but long distance, no, cross country, I couldn't see it. I never thought that one day I would actually live very close to the official route of the Athens Marathon. That's just what we did in Athens when we were there. Almost every day I could walk, and I would walk the 200 meters or so from our apartment block where we lived. I would walk to the main road, that was called Messagean Avenue, and that's the route of the Athens Marathon, which is run every year in November and attracts runners from all over the world. 25,000, 30,000 people come. It's very difficult to register for it because they register years in advance to do the Athens Marathon, the official first marathon from the town of Marathonus, 26 miles out of Athens, down what is now Messagean Avenue and into Athens city center. Well, if I walked from my apartment block, just about a few hundred meters, I would hit Messagean Avenue, and then I could, if I ran the 500 meters or so along Messagean Avenue to the right, to the nearest metro station, which I needed to get to go to the church office every day, then I could say that almost every day I ran the route of the Athens Marathon, which was partly true. But of course, there's a big difference between running 500 meters along the route and running the whole race, 26 miles. And as anyone who's ever done any long distance running, you'll know that we need that necessary motivation to keep going through all those kilometers or miles, however you want to measure it, to keep going to the end. And here the writer is concerned to motivate these Hebrew Christians who are in danger perhaps of falling out of the race, of quitting before the finishing line. And so I thought as you begin a new year, maybe you begin a new year individually. I don't know what your individual circumstances are. As you begin a new year as a church, as you've already been prayed, as Ewan has led us in prayer, you think about the future. What is the motivation that the writer wants to give us to run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us? Well, I suppose in a word, the writer is concerned with our vision, what we are looking at, what we are looking to, what's inspiring us, what's guiding us. You see, vision is absolutely essential for life. Without vision, the people perish, the Bible tells us. Without vision, there's no hope. I suppose positive vision and hope, they're the same thing, really. And in biblical terms, vision, positive vision, godly vision, is a picture of a future that is better than the present. And our basis for that vision, our confidence, is because God has a vision for this world which is so much better than the present, and a vision that he is working towards, and he has called us in to be participants in that vision. So we have a need for that clear vision, both in our individual lives personally, and then in our lives as a congregation, as a church, if we're going to move into 2021 with that sense of hope and expectation and joy. So here in these opening verses of chapter 12, the writer directs our vision in three simple ways, I think, which might help us this morning. First of all, here's the first point. First of all, he tells us to look around and be encouraged. To look around and be encouraged. Remember how the chapter opens? Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, we're surrounded. Here's the first motivation to run the race in 2021. Now, the picture again, to go back to Greece actually, originally the picture is of the packed stadium, of the athletics, and of the people in the stands as the runners enter the stadium at the end of the marathon races, what still happens today in Athens. Here's the picture of a packed stadium, but now all the people of God who have gone before us in the stands are encouraging us. They're on their feet, they're shouting, they're applauding. And as Ewan mentioned, of course, the context here in this letter to the Hebrews, all these cloud of witnesses are the people who have just been described in the preceding chapter, in chapter 11. They are the heroes of the faith. They're a great cloud of witnesses. But they are witnesses, not so much in the sense that they are witnessing now our present race, just looking on, but I think they are witnesses to us as we look into the stands and we see them having completed their race. They are shouting encouragement to us. They're saying, look, we ran the race. We finished the race. So if we can do it, you can as well. They are witnesses of how the race can be run. They are witnesses to God's promises, to God's power, to God's plan for our lives. They are witnesses to God's unfailing purposes that were accomplished in their life and will be accomplished in our lives by his grace. That's why they are encouraging witnesses to us. There's a wonderful promise in Psalm 138, the last verse especially. As we begin this new year, let's just listen to this. 138, the Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Your love, O Lord, endures forever. Do not abandon the works of your hands. The Lord will fulfill his purposes for me. And all these people in the stands, they are witnesses to the fact that God didn't abandon them. He fulfilled his purposes in and through them. They are powerful witnesses to the fact that God's love endures forever. And this sense of them being witnesses, reminding us that even in their lives, God's plan and purpose, God's promises were fulfilled. Now, just think of it. Were all those people in the stands in Hebrews 11, were they all magnificent spiritual athletes, spiritual giants in a class of their own. Were they? No, not at all. You read the list. There was Jacob, the deceiver, yet he finished the race. There's Moses, the murderer, but he finished the race. There's David, the adulterer, but he finished by God's grace. There's Rahab, the prostitute. She's in the stands. She's shouting. She's a witness to God's grace. She finished. There's Gideon, the doubter, and yet he finished. There's even Samson, the waster. But by God's grace, he's there. He finished the race. He's in the stands. So says the writer, look around and be encouraged. Look around. Keep the vision of the victory of God's strength in their weakness. Keep that vision clear as you run the race. Aware of your own weakness, yes, but think of God's grace in their lives and how his purposes were fulfilled. Be encouraged. Surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And of course, we can add to their numbers, can't we? Down through church history. Amazing things done by ordinary people, men and women, through God's grace. There's William Carey, the humble cobbler from Northampton, who took the gospel to India, who said of himself, I can only plod. I can only plod. And yet what plodding by God's grace as he ran the marathon. He left an amazing legacy of gospel work on the subcontinent of India. And then there's people personally known to us, aren't there? Grandparents, mothers and fathers, uncles and aunts, who have shown us God's grace, who have shown us Jesus, the power of the gospel in their lives. And now they've all finished the race. Some have finished the race this year, as we look back over 2020. Some very recently have finished the race. And yes, there's sadness and there's loss, but by God's grace, they've finished the race. And they are powerful witnesses to his purposes and his grace and his power in their lives. So, first of all, look around you, be encouraged. That's the first motivation. Secondly, though, he says, look within you and be challenged. You see, we do have a race to run. That's the reality of the Christian life. We each have a race that we must run and no one else can run it for us. It's the race marked out for you. And so you and I have to accept the challenge as Christian believers, as followers of Jesus. There's preparation we must do. There's discipline, as that passage that we read together earlier talks about. There's discipline that we have to accept. We have to embrace these things, as these verses tell us, if we're going to finish the race. So first of all, the writer says, let us throw off everything that hinders us. You see, no one can run a marathon just on a whim, can they? You can't get up one morning. If you've never done any long distance running or training, you don't get up one morning and decide to run a marathon that day. No, there's got to be planning. There's got to be preparation. There's practice. There's perseverance. There's training through good weather, bad weather, and so on. You just can't do it on a whim without thinking about it. And so in the race of the Christian life, says the writer here, we have to accept personally the challenge of discipline. We have to throw off everything that hinders us. Again, the writer is thinking of the Greek games, isn't he? Of the athletics. The athlete in the Greek games is stripped down to the absolute minimum. Some even ran without clothes, we're told, but certainly down to the bare minimum, so that he wears nothing that will hold him back at all. I mean, it sounds daft, doesn't it? But we wouldn't dream of running a race with a overcoat on and your Wellington boots and carrying a suitcase. Of course you don't run a race like that. Now listen, there's nothing wrong in any of those things. the overcoat, the Wellington boots, a suitcase. In their place, there's nothing wrong with them. But they're not going to help you run the race. And so I think that's the principle, the spiritual principle that we can learn here. It's exactly the same in the race of faith. There are things in our lives which are not wrong. They're not wrong in and of themselves. They're not condemned in the Bible. They could be innocent things. But maybe for you personally, they're things that hinder. They're weights that hold you back in the race of holiness, the race of freedom to serve the Lord. Maybe some relationships, maybe too much time on the computer, maybe some magazines or stuff that you read, maybe even just, well, lifestyle issues, food and drink and things. They're not necessarily wrong in and of themselves, but for you, it's not the same for other people, but for you, you know there's discipline here that you need to take in hand. They're not helping you run the race for Jesus. Throw off everything that hinders. You see, the race of the Christian life is not run well by asking, well, what's wrong with that? Why can't I do that? What's wrong with that? No, that's not the right question. The question is this helpful? Or will it hinder? Will it promote greater faith, greater love, greater purity, greater humility, greater self-control? Does it help me run the race to the glory of God? Or is it getting in the way, to be honest? Is it a hindrance? Then throw it off. Accept the challenge. That's the first thing. But then secondly, he says, and deal with the sin that so easily entangles us. Now, that's of a different category, I think. Now we really are talking about the things that we honestly know in our hearts they're wrong. They're wrong. And yet we do them. We tolerate it. We just will not give it up. What are we looking at? What are we reading? What are we filling our minds with? What are we listening to? What are we spending our time and our energy and maybe our money on? What are we living for? I don't know. But God, the Holy Spirit, will be speaking to us individually. And we need to be open and honest as we start this new year if we're going to run the race successfully and to his glory. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the need sometimes just to prove yourself, to be thought well of by others. Pride. Maybe it's the need to have things in order to be happy. Materialism, greed. You know, I think this is the sin, if I may say so, of so many evangelicals in the Western church, which we don't even recognize as a sin, and yet it's mentioned so many times in the New Testament. Greed, the lust for things. Perhaps it's food, gluttony, or maybe more obvious things. There's the desire for pleasures which are prohibited. We know they're wrong. Well, you know what you're struggling with. You know what your issues are. Maybe you're just refusing to forgive somebody. And that's wrong. I don't know you, but God knows you, and he loves you. And as his child, as we read in that reading, he is disciplining you. He wants you to change, and he does it out of love because he wants you to run the race successfully. You know what area of your life you're finding difficult to surrender to God may be, but accept the challenge. Don't go through 2021 like it was through 2020. Sometimes, it's helpful to make a list of these sorts of things, to pray them through with God. I don't mean just making New Year's resolutions, although those can be helpful, but seriously, and maybe it's appropriate sometimes to share these things with one or two, a trusted Christian friend who can pray for you and help you, to whom you can be accountable, and maybe he to you or she to you. It's like having a coach, in a race, helping you improve, helping you do better, accepting the discipline. You need a plan, a new training regime perhaps, and you need to commit to it for 2021. And listen, don't listen to the lie of Satan. Satan who will tell you, you cannot change. Things will never be better. That you're trapped. You can never hope for anything being different. No. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. There's a fight to be won. There's a race to be run. So accept the challenge. But notwithstanding everything I've just said, and I think it's right, and obviously the writer of the Hebrews wants us to take these words seriously, you will not run this race by creating a new training regime, spiritual training regime alone. You'll not make it to the finishing line just by your own determination, by your own discipline. And so that brings us to the last and the most important element of all in our motivation to run the race. Here it is in our text. It's the vision of Jesus. We're to look unto Jesus. Look to Jesus and be assured. Fix your eyes on Jesus. That's the most important part of this admonition, encouragement. So look around and be encouraged, yes. Look within and be challenged. But above all, and primarily, look to Jesus and be assured. Listen, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Listen, friends, mere rules and regulations, not even more repentance and reformation, as good and as necessary as those things are, those things alone will not overcome sin. Those things alone will not help us to get to the end successfully. What we need is a new power. We need supernatural power. That's why we must look to Jesus. What we need is the expulsive power of a new affection that will overcome all the other attractions and distractions. We need the love of Jesus. We need to know his love for us, and we need to know our love for him increase and abound. Look to Jesus. We need that superior satisfaction to all the other things that this world legitimately, rightly offers us, but nothing to be compared with looking to Jesus. We need to cultivate the capacity for pleasure and joy and satisfaction in our relationship with Jesus Christ. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Never think of trying to run this race alone as we start 2021. You can't do it. Remember, it is Jesus who is the author and the perfecter, the completer, the finisher of our faith. He's the Alpha and he's the Omega. He's the beginning. He's the end. He's the foundation. He's the source of our faith from start to finish. So says the writer, in effect, listen, if you want vision, look to the most magnificent person in the universe. Fix your eyes on Jesus. And actually, very quickly, there are just three things here that he's directing us to particularly fix on. He says, fix them on his person. He is the most magnificent person in the universe. This God-man, as we've been thinking over this season of Christmas, Emmanuel, God with us. We're not going to run the race successfully just because we've agreed to a more strenuous, disciplined regime, but we're going to run it as the reality of Jesus thrills our souls and sets our hearts on fire. We're to dwell on the glory of his person. Consider him, says this writer. Fix your eyes on his person. Consider his majesty, his power. Consider his sovereignty, his strength. Consider his love and his grace. And above all, he's run this race before us. He knows the course. That's what the word author really means. It's the leader. He's the pioneer. He's gone ahead of us. He's blazed the trail. So he's able to show us where the obstacles are, and he's able to bring us home triumphantly. Fix your eyes on his person, the magnificence of our Savior. And then he says, fix them on his passion, who for the joy that was set before him did what? Endured the cross, despising the shame. We're to consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men. Why? Because he loves you and me. And he wants us to finish the race. You know, no runner in the race ever had such terrible experiences as Jesus had. The course he followed, well, it took him all the way to the cross, to suffering and death. And not just to death, but death on a cross, death, the accursed death, for you and for me. And yet he kept looking ahead, pressing on, with his heart fixed on that future joy, which he knew he would bring to his Father, and the joy of bringing you and me home, finishing our race. In your struggle against sin, says the writer, you've not resisted to the point of shedding your own blood, but Jesus has. Consider him. And he did it for you. He went all the way to the cross for you. That's where his race ended, so that you and I can be forgiven, we can be restored, we can be reorientated, we can run the race of faith successfully to the ends. So consider him. Remember his love, seen in his passion and his death for you and for me. Consider him so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. And then finally, fix Jesus, fix your eyes on his position. This is why it's an encouragement. Where is he now? He has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. There he is, this glorious pioneer and perfecter of our faith. He's crowned. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He's there ruling from the utmost heights of heaven. He's on the throne of the universe, despite all that's going on in our world this morning. And so he's there for you and for me, for all those who would enter the race and follow his lead. And from that position of power and glory, he is perfecting, he is completing our faith. He is bringing all his purposes for us to fulfillment. He's completing what he has started for you and for me, and he will bring us home. He will bring us to the end of the race. So look to Jesus. Look to Jesus and be assured. You know, according to the letter, the writer here of the Hebrews, looking to Jesus is not just a Christian option, it's the Christian way of life. That's the vision. And so as we begin a new year, we trust, we give the uncertain terrain of the race of 2021 to the one who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We don't know what lies ahead in 2021, but we know the one who has gone ahead of us, who's the pioneer and who will perfect his plans in and through each of us. So as we anticipate the changes, the challenges of the coming year, let's fix our eyes on Jesus. When you're tempted, look to Jesus. When you're disappointed, look to Jesus. When you're in distress, look to Jesus. When you're doubting, look to Jesus. When you're cold and backslidden, look to Jesus. Don't wait. Don't wait. Don't try and improve yourself. Come to him. Fix your eyes on Jesus. So maybe I can sum it like this. Let the vision of his person be our assurance, and let the vision of his passion be our comfort, and let the vision of his power be our strength. Because you see, the victory of his cross and resurrection is ours too. It's for us. We are united to Christ. And it is his power that strengthens us as we run the race throughout 2021. Yes, we have to run the race, yet it is not I, but Christ who strengthens me. It's his power. So, look to Jesus, be assured. And we're going to sing now, I think.